The cabin smelled like recycled air and burnt coffee. Somewhere over the Atlantic, Flight 447 hummed through darkness at 37,000 feet. Most passengers slept. A few scrolled phones on airplane mode. In seat 14A, a woman in a faded hoodie leaned against the window, eyes closed, headphones in. She looked ordinary, tired, maybe mid-30s, the kind of person you'd pass in an airport terminal without a second glance. The flight attendant didn't notice her either when she walked past with the beverage cart. Neither did the businessman in 14B, who'd been typing emails for 2 hours straight. The woman's hands rested in her lap, fingers calloused in a way that didn't match her casual clothes. A small scar traced her right temple, disappearing into her hairline. But no one was looking. Then the cockpit door opened. The co-pilot stepped into the aisle, scanning faces with an urgency that made several passengers glance up. He moved toward the back, paused, then returned to the front. He whispered something to the lead flight attendant. She frowned, shook her head. He tried again, more insistent this time. She picked up the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your senior flight attendant speaking. We have an unusual request from the flight deck. We need to identify if there is a Colonel Cade on board. If you are Colonel Cade, or if you know where Colonel Cade is seated, please press your call button immediately." Silence. Then murmurs rippled through the cabin like wind through tall grass. The woman in 14A didn't move. The businessman in 14B glanced at her, then away. The intercom crackled again. "This is urgent. We need Colonel Cade to identify themselves right now." Still nothing. The co-pilot walked the aisle again, slower this time, eyes searching each row. He stopped at 14A, hesitated. The woman's hoodie read Stanford Track and Field in faded letters. Her sneakers were scuffed. She looked like a college student coming home for break. He moved on. In the cockpit, the pilot's voice was tight on the radio. "Oceanic Control, Delta 447, we have a situation. Received encrypted military priority message requesting immediate contact with passenger manifest Colonel A. Cade. Cannot locate. Repeat, cannot visually confirm." The response came back clipped, professional, but underneath it something else. Something that made the pilot's hand tighten on the yoke. "Delta 447, authenticate Cade is on board. Message classification, Crimson. Repeat, Crimson priority, National Security Directive. You are instructed to wake every passenger if necessary." The pilot and co-pilot exchanged looks. Crimson priority hadn't been used since. "Understood, Oceanic. Initiating cabin-wide identification." In 14A, the woman's eyes opened. Just barely, she didn't move otherwise, but something in her expression changed. A kind of resignation, or maybe recognition. She'd been hopping for one more night of sleep. The intercom clicked on again. This time the pilot's voice carried a different weight. Not a request, a command. "This is Captain Reeves. I need every passenger's attention. We are under direct military protocol. I am looking for Colonel Aviara Cade. This is not optional. Colonel Cade, identify yourself now or I will be forced to initiate emergency protocols." The woman in 14A reached up slowly and pressed the call button. The chime echoed through the sudden quiet. Every head in the cabin turned. The businessman in 14B stared. The flight attendant rushed over, confused because she'd walked past this woman a dozen times. The co-pilot appeared, radio in hand, face pale. "You're Colonel Cade." She pulled out her headphones. Her voice was quiet, steady. "I'm Colonel Cade." "Ma'am, I need to see identification." She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out a military ID. Not the standard issue, the kind with extra encoding. The kind that made the co-pilot's hand shake slightly as he examined it under the overhead light. He keyed his radio. "Cockpit, confirmed. We have Cade. Seat 14A." The response was immediate. "Bring her forward. Secure line required." As she stood, the businessman in 14B noticed her hands again. The way she moved, economical, controlled, like someone who'd spent years in a cockpit under G-forces. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'6", but something about her presence made people step back. The co-pilot led her through first class. Passengers watched with open curiosity now. In the cockpit, Captain Reeves turned, expecting someone in uniform. Someone who looked like the colonels he'd flown with back in his Navy days. He saw the hoodie, the tired eyes, the woman who looked like she should be ordering a latte, not receiving crimson priority calls. Colonel Cade, his tone carried doubt. Captain, she nodded once, professional, then noticed the secure satellite phone in his hand. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. He handed it over. They said you'd know the authentication. She took the phone, pressed it to her ear. Cade, authentication Victor Tango 77 Whiskey. Pause, confirmed. Another pause longer. When? Her voice stayed level, but her knuckles whitened around the phone. Understood, ETA to Andrews. She glanced at the instrument panel, processed the data instantly. 5 hours 40. I'll be ready. Alert the cab. She handed the phone back. Captain Reeves waited. Ma'am, I was told if you authenticated, I'm to offer you the jump seat. Whatever's happening. What's happening, she said quietly, is that someone just shot down one of ours over the Baltic, and apparently I'm the only pilot they trust to fly the response. The cockpit went silent except for the endless hum of engines. The co-pilot stared. Captain Reeves found his voice. The only pilot, ma'am, with respect there are. I know what there are, Captain. She moved to the jump seat, settled in with the ease of someone who'd spent 10,000 hours in cockpits far less comfortable. And I know why they called me. Question is whether you watched the news 6 years ago. Recognition flickered across Reeves' face. Then shock. The Kandahar intercept, that was, he stopped. Your Viper. The woman didn't smile. The woman who'd been sleeping in 14A, who'd hoped to finish her cross-country flight in anonymous peace, leaned back against the jump seat and closed her eyes again. But sleep wouldn't come now. It never did after a crimson call. She could already feel it, the weight of the helmet, the stick in her hand, the taste of pure oxygen, the sky waiting. Behind her in the cabin, the businessman in 14B was frantically Googling Kandahar intercept and Viper pilot. What he found made him set his phone down slowly, hands trembling. The woman in the Stanford hoodie wasn't just a colonel. She was the colonel. The one they'd said couldn't be real. The story they'd called embellished. Impossible. 6 years ago, over the mountains of Afghanistan, a routine patrol had turned into 40 minutes of hell. Surface-to-air missiles. 3 aircraft. Only one made it out. The recording of that pilot's radio calls, calm, precise, executing maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible in a fully loaded F-15, had become legend in military aviation circles. They'd called her Viper because of the way she'd struck, fast, exact, uncoiling from defensive to offensive in seconds, but also because of what she'd said on that recording when ground control asked if she was hit, if she needed to abort. Her response had been 2 words, delivered in a tone so cold it made veteran pilots shiver. Negative. Hunting. She'd brought both her wingmen home, alive, against odds that made statisticians recalculate their models. Then she disappeared from public service. Medical discharge, the reports said. Combat fatigue. The Pentagon held a quiet ceremony, gave her medals she didn't intend to receive. The media moved on. But the Air Force hadn't forgotten. And now, at 37,000 feet over the Atlantic, Colonel Aviara Cade sat in a commercial cockpit and remembered why she'd walked away. Not because she couldn't fly, but because she could. Because every time she climbed into that seat, strapped in, felt the engine ignition rumble through her spine, she became something else. Something that scared her almost as much as it had scared the enemy. Captain Reeves broke the silence. Ma'am, whatever you need, fuel priority, direct routing. I need you to fly your flight, Captain. Get these people home safe. I'll worry about the rest. She opened her eyes, glanced at the instrument panel again. Old habit. checking altitude, airspeed, heading. Even when she wasn't at the controls, her mind flew the aircraft. But I will take coffee if you have it. It's going to be a long night. The co-pilot scrambled to get it, black, strong. She wrapped both hands around the cup and stared out the cockpit windscreen at the darkness beyond. Somewhere out there, across thousands of miles of ocean and land, a fighter jet sat in a hangar with her name stenciled below the canopy. They'd kept it, maintained it, waiting. Because some weapons you don't retire, you just keep them sharp, ready. "They're sending you alone," Captain Reeves asked quietly. Aviara took a slow sip of coffee. "They're sending me first. Alone is different." The distinction mattered. First meant scout, meant assessment, meant someone trusted to read a situation and make decisions at Mach speeds with incomplete information. First meant you didn't wait for orders. You made them. The co-pilot found his voice. "Ma'am, I have to ask, why you?" Not doubting, just, "There are younger pilots, newer aircraft, full squadrons on alert status right now." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know what the hardest thing about flying is? Landing. Knowing when not to shoot." She set the coffee cup in the holder, careful, precise. "Most pilots are good, great even. They can handle the aircraft, execute the mission, follow row. But when you're alone up there, when it's just you and a bandit and the world is screaming in your headset and every instinct says fire, that's when it matters. Not how fast you are, how well you shoot, but whether you can hold fire when the book says shoot because something doesn't fit, because you see the bigger picture." Captain Reeves processed this. "And you can do that." "I've done that 3 times in combat when it would have started wars we couldn't afford." She paused. "And once when I should have fired and didn't, got my wingman killed for it." The cockpit pressure seemed to drop. Neither pilot knew what to say. Aviara didn't elaborate. Some stories didn't need telling. They just sat in your chest, heavy, permanent. "That's why they're sending me," she finished. "Because I've made both mistakes, and I'm still here." Far below, the Atlantic rolled in darkness. Ahead, the eastern seaboard approached, invisible but inevitable. In 5 hours she'd land at Andrews. In 6 she'd be at Langley. In 7 she'd be strapping into an F-15X that smelled like jet fuel and purpose. And somewhere over the Baltic, a Russian pilot would be congratulating himself for the kill, unaware that he just triggered something his commanders would deeply regret. Because the Pentagon didn't send Viper for routine intercepts. They sent her when they needed someone who could thread the needle between war and peace at 600 miles per hour. When they needed someone who understood that every trigger pull echoed through history. When they needed someone who'd been to the edge and chosen to step back, but could still step forward if necessary. Aviara closed her eyes again, not sleeping, just centering. The way her instructor had taught her years ago, before the academy, before the wings. Back when she was just a kid in New Mexico who watched fighters trace contrails across the desert sky and knew, absolutely knew, that she belonged up there. Her father had laughed. "Fighter pilots are cowboys. You're 4'0" and you get airsick in cars." She'd grown 6 inches and conquered the motion sickness through pure determination. Flew her first solo at 16. Entered the academy at 18 with scores that made recruiters blink. Made it through pilot training with marks that put her in the top 2%. Got assigned to F-15s when they barely allowed women in combat roles. Spent 10 years proving she belonged. Every single day. Then Kandahar happened, and suddenly she wasn't proving anything. She was just trying to survive the weight of being right. "Ma'am," the co-pilot's voice pulled her back. "We're getting another transmission, priority channel." She took the headset he offered, Cade. The voice on the other end was one she recognized. General Marcus Shaw, her former wing commander. The man who'd pinned her silver star on and then quietly suggested she might want to consider a transfer to a training role. For her own good, he'd said. She'd chosen medical discharge instead. Easier than explaining that she didn't want to teach people to be what she'd become. "Viper, how's civilian life treating you?" "It was treating me fine, until about 10 minutes ago, sir." A dry chuckle. Yeah, sorry about that, but you know I wouldn't pull you back unless it was necessary. I know, she did. Shaw didn't play games. What's the actual situation? Russian Su-57 shot down a Lithuanian Air Force transport over international waters, 300 miles off Kaliningrad. No warning, no provocation. Clean kill. Pilot ejected but died on impact with water. Cold as hell out there. Aviara's jaw tightened. Casualties on the transport. 14. All civilian contractors. Engineers heading home from a NATO infrastructure project. Jesus, she exhaled slowly. And they want me to do what exactly? We want you to find the Su-57. It's still airborne. We think the pilot went off script. This wasn't authorized from Moscow. Too clean, too aggressive. Intelligence suggests a rogue element. Young gun trying to make a name. But if we send a full squadron, Russia has to respond. This escalates into something nobody wants. If we send you. If you send me, it's deniable. Off book, a ghost. Exactly, you find him, you assess. If he's acting alone, you spook him home. If there's more to it, you report. We're not asking you to engage, just to be our eyes. And if he engages me? Silence on the line. Then I trust your judgment, Colonel, like I always have. She understood. Rules of engagement were flexible up there when you were alone. She'd have authorization to defend herself, which meant authorization to end this if necessary. The Pentagon was threading the needle, sending someone who could fight but probably wouldn't. Someone whose reputation might be enough to defuse the situation without a shot fired, or someone who could finish it quickly if it went wrong, before it became an international incident that couldn't be contained. Political warfare fought at Mach 2. She'd always hated this part. I'll need full tactical data, satellite tracking, his last known heading. You'll have it uploaded before you land. Andrews will have your bird hot. You'll launch within 30 minutes of touchdown. 30 minutes? She let that sink in. No time for briefings. No time for second guessing. Just the way she used to operate. Trust the data, trust the training, trust the instinct. Understood, sir. Viper, Shaw's voice softened slightly. It's good to have you back, even if it's just for one night. Don't get sentimental on me, General. I'm just taking a ride. Right, just a ride. He didn't believe it any more than she did. See you on the other side, Shaw out. The line clicked dead. Aviara handed the headset back to the co-pilot, who looked like he wanted to ask 50 questions but knew better. Captain Reeves kept his eyes forward, flying the aircraft, but she could feel his awareness. The way he adjusted his seat slightly, sat straighter. Flying a commercial 767 suddenly felt different when you had a combat legend in your cockpit, even one in a Stanford hoodie. Ma'am, Reeves said carefully, I know it's not my place, but are you really going up alone against a Su-57? Those things are. Fourth-generation Russian stealth fighters with thrust vectoring and advanced avionics. I know what they are, Captain. She allowed a thin smile. I also know they have a radar cross-section about 3 times larger than advertised, and their pilots train about half as much as ours. It's not the aircraft that wins fights. It's the person flying it. Still, she agreed. It's dangerous, but that's the job. That was always the job. What she didn't say, that she'd been waiting for this. 6 years of civilian life, of sleeping through nights without dreaming of missile locks and dying engines, of walking through airports without calculating blast angles and exit routes. 6 years of trying to be normal, and in 10 minutes it had all fallen away like paper skin. Underneath she was still the same, still Viper, still the woman who flew into hell and came out the other side with blood under her nails and ice in her veins. She'd missed it. God help her, she'd missed it. The Atlantic slid beneath them, dark and infinite. In the cabin behind, passengers dozed or watched movies, unaware that the woman who'd been sleeping in 14A was now planning an intercept mission over hostile waters, unaware that in a few hours, the thin line between war and peace would rest in her hands, literally, on a control stick in a fighter jet moving faster than sound. The co-pilot checked his watch. 4 hours to Andrews, ma'am. Then I suggest you both pay attention to your flying. I'm going to need every minute of that for prep. She pulled a tablet from her hoodie pocket, not a civilian model, she noted, but military-grade encrypted, and began pulling up files. Satellite data, weather patterns, Russian patrol routes. She absorbed it all with the focused intensity of a predator studying prey. Captain Reeves watched her from the corner of his eye. The transformation was remarkable. The tired woman who'd been sleeping against the window was gone. In her place sat someone who radiated lethal competence. Her eyes moved across the data with machine-like precision. Her fingers traced potential flight paths on the screen. She was already flying the mission in her mind, running through scenarios, calculating angles and speeds and contingencies. Captain, she didn't look up from the tablet. Ma'am, when we land, I need you to make sure the passengers deplane quickly. No delays. I don't want anyone seeing what's waiting for me on that tarmac. I can arrange that. Good, she glanced up briefly. And Captain, thank you for your service, both of you. It's easy to forget that every flight matters, even the routine ones. You're getting 400 people home safe tonight. That's worth more than most missions I've flown. Reeves felt something catch in his chest. The gratitude was genuine, unexpected. This woman who'd saved lives in combat, who was about to fly into danger again, taking a moment to recognize him, to see him. Most military brass he dealt with treated commercial pilots like bus drivers, but Cade understood. A pilot was a pilot. The sky didn't care about your uniform. It's an honor having you aboard, ma'am, even if it's just in the jump seat. She returned to her tablet, but he saw the ghost of a smile. Not just, Captain, never just. The words hung in the air, carrying more weight than their syllables suggested, because she was right. Nothing was ever just anything when you did it with full presence. Every action mattered. Every choice rippled outward. She'd learned that at altitude, where a single degree of error could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, where hesitation killed and overconfidence killed faster. Outside the cockpit windows, the sky began to lighten, dawn approaching. Somewhere over the Atlantic, the sun was already climbing, painting the clouds in shades of amber and rose. Aviara watched it for a moment, remembering other sunrises, over deserts, over mountains, over oceans where hostile radar painted her aircraft, and she'd had to decide in fractions of seconds whether to turn back or press forward. She'd always pressed forward. That was probably the problem, and definitely why they'd called her tonight. In the cabin, the businessman in 14B had found the recordings, the actual audio from Kandahar. He listened through headphones, eyes widening with each transmission. The woman's voice, Viper's voice, calm and measured even as alarms screamed in the background. Viper to ground control, I have 3 missile locks going defensive. Break, break, break. Flares deployed, chaff deployed, still locked, rolling inverted. The sound of G-forces pulling at her voice, making it tight but never panicked. Viper to Hawk 3, break right now. Hawk 3, do you copy? Break right. Good, you're clear. Hawk 5 status. A pause. Hawk 5 status. Longer pause. Then so quiet it was almost inaudible. Ground control, Hawk 5 is hit. I see shoot. Going back for him. Negative, Viper. You are Winchester. Repeat, Winchester. RTB immediately. Winchester. Pilot speak for out of ammunition. Defenseless. Ground control, there are 3 hostiles still in the air and a pilot in the dirt. I'm not leaving him. Viper, you do not have authorization to. The recording cut to static, then back to her voice, different now, colder. Authorization denied, going dark, Viper out. What happened next had been classified for 2 years before enough people leaked pieces that the full story emerged. She'd flown back into the combat zone with no weapons, used her aircraft as a decoy to draw fire away from the downed pilot, and somehow, the physics still made analysts argue, pulled off a series of defensive maneuvers so aggressive that 2 of the hostile aircraft collided trying to follow her. The third pilot, seeing his wingman go down, had disengaged. She'd circled until rescue arrived, fuel gauge reading 0. flying on vapor and willpower. They'd had to tow her aircraft off the runway when she landed. Engines dead. She'd walked away like it was a training exercise. The businessman paused the recording, looked toward the cockpit where he knew she was sitting, tried to reconcile the legend with the woman in the hoodie. Failed. Some people existed beyond reconciliation. They simply were, forces of nature wearing human skin. He pressed play again, listening to the end. After she'd landed, after the rescue was complete, ground control had asked her to explain her decision to go dark and disobey orders. Her response was in the official report, 3 words that became the epitaph of her career. "I don't leave people." That was Viper. That was Colonel Aviara Cade. And in 4 hours she'd be back in the sky, flying toward danger again because that's what she did. That's all she'd ever done. Not for glory, not for medals, for the simple, stubborn, impossible principle that you don't leave people, not in the dirt, not in the water, not anywhere. Even if it costs you everything. In the cockpit, Aviara closed her eyes one more time, not to sleep, to remember the faces of her wingmen, the feeling of the stick under her hand. The moment when fear transformed into focus and you stopped thinking and just flew, became the aircraft, became the sky, became something more than human and less at the same time, pure purpose, pure motion. She was ready. She'd always been ready. The only question was whether the world was ready for what came next, because sending Viper into the sky wasn't like deploying a normal pilot. It was like uncaging a falcon that had learned to hunt, beautiful, precise, and absolutely unforgiving once the dive began. The Russian pilot over the Baltic had no idea what was coming. He'd shot down a transport plane, killed 14 people, and thought he'd just added a notch to his reputation. What he'd actually done was trigger a response that would define the rest of his life, one way or another. Aviara opened her eyes and checked the time. 3 hours 50 minutes to Andrews. She began her mental pre-flight checklist, not for the 767, for the F-15 that waited, every switch position, every system check, every emergency procedure. She'd memorized them years ago, but she reviewed them anyway because complacency killed faster than enemy fire. Her fingers moved slightly, muscle memory rehearsing the motions. Throttle up, stick back, roll left, hard right. Weapons hot. The co-pilot watched, fascinated and slightly unnerved. She wasn't even in the aircraft yet, and she was already flying it. "Ma'am," he ventured, "can I ask what it's like, flying something like an F-15 in combat?" She considered the question. Most people asked, few really wanted the answer. It's like holding lightning in your hands. Everything happens at speeds your brain can't process consciously, so you train until it's instinct. Until you don't think enemy at 6 o'clock, you just act. Roll, climb, fire. And when you're up there alone with nothing but sky and threat and opportunity, she paused. It's the only time I've ever felt completely honest. No pretending, no hiding. Just capability meeting necessity. Either you're good enough or you're not. The sky doesn't lie. It doesn't flatter, it just is. And you were good enough. I was lucky enough. Good and lucky aren't the same thing, but you need both. She returned to her tablet. The pilots who think they're just good, they're the ones who don't come back. The conversation ended there. She'd said enough, more than she usually did. Maybe it was the altitude, or the knowledge that in a few hours she'd be back in the place where words didn't matter anymore. Only action, only result. Captain Reeves made a minor course adjustment. The aircraft responded smoothly, a slight bank that passengers probably didn't even notice. But Aviara felt it, felt the shift in gravity, the subtle change in engine note. She'd always been sensitive to motion. Her father had been wrong about the airsickness. She'd never suffered from it. What she suffered from was an awareness of flight so acute it bordered on supernatural. She could feel turbulence before instruments registered it. Could sense when an aircraft was slightly out of trim. Her instructors had called it the touch. That indefinable quality that separated competent pilots from exceptional ones. She'd never told anyone, but sometimes she wondered if it was less a gift and more a curse. Because when you could feel everything, you also felt every mistake, every close call, every time you pushed the envelope and almost tore through it. She'd walked away from crashes that should have killed her twice, not because of skill, because of that awareness, that split-second warning system that made her react before her conscious mind knew there was a problem. Maybe that's why she'd survived Kandahar. Maybe that's why Shaw wanted her now, not just for her skills, for that intangible edge, that thing that couldn't be taught or trained, only recognized, only trusted. The tablet beeped softly. New data upload. She reviewed it quickly. The Su-57 last known position, heading, speed. She plotted an intercept course in her mind, factoring in fuel constraints and detection ranges. She'd come in low under radar, use the Earth's curvature, get close before going active, let him see her only when she wanted to be seen. Psychology mattered in air combat as much as physics. If she could make him question, make him hesitate, that might be enough. Nobody wanted to tangle with Viper. The name carried weight in military aviation circles, even among adversaries. Respect and fear in equal measure. Of course, this Russian might not know, might be too young, too cocky, might see a single F-15 and think, easy kill. That would be unfortunate for him, because Aviara Cade hadn't stayed alive by being easy anything. She'd stayed alive by being 3 moves ahead and utterly ruthless when circumstances demanded it. The mercy she'd shown, the times she didn't fire, those were calculated decisions, proof she could hold back. But when she didn't hold back, when the decision was made, she was surgical. Efficient. The kind of pilot whose gun camera footage made instructors pause and rewind and wonder how it was possible. 3 hours 30, the co-pilot announced quietly. Aviara nodded, checked her watch, synced it with the mission clock already running in her head. Every minute mattered now, every second, because somewhere over the Baltic, a man who'd killed 14 people was flying home, thinking he'd gotten away with it, thinking he'd struck a blow for his country, his pride, his ego, whatever motivated him. He was wrong, and in approximately 8 hours, he was going to learn exactly how wrong. When a ghost from the sky appeared on his radar, and everything he thought he knew about air superiority evaporated like morning fog. Viper was coming, and she never missed.